That'd be it. All right. We are back in action. Okay. So our goals for integument is.
Dr. Petro,
Yes.
I had a quick question.
Oh, yes, please.
So this was a question I had in undergrad and it still haunts me to this day, but it was about which one would be worse to give to a patient. Would it be the wrong blood type or the wrong RH factor? Because both can lead to death. But I was just curious what you would say.
My answer would be both, unless if I was forced to choose one.
What if it's like a MPlex 2 question where it's like
If you're forced to choose,
you're in a zombie apocalypse and you don't have.
You could actually take them as both being giving the wrong blood type. But if I was going to say which one would be worse, it would be given the wrong, unless if we're dealing with fetal, both could lead to a reaction of self. So an antigenic reaction of harming self, but giving the wrong blood type would be worse than giving the wrong RH, unless if it's in a pregnant mom. But both would be worse. That would be my answer, would be both. Because technically when you're dealing with, we were just doing some genetic, I don't know if y'all can see my screen behind me, kind of. We were just doing in the break some genetic memory about our blood types. And if we remember, our AB antigens are co-dominant. So that's how we can have A blood, B blood, AB blood, or O blood. O is recessive. So if you only can get the O trait if you have a parent that carries the O trait, or if you have a parent that is O blood themselves. So if we had a person who had AO, so they were A type blood, and we had a parent who was B type blood, we would see we'd have A and O, we'd have A and B here, and then through typical Mendelian genetics, we make our little fun chart. And so we would have one kid that would potentially have AB blood, one kid that would have B blood, one kid that would be A blood, and one that would be O type blood. And then you also have your RH factor. Your RH factor, your ROGAM factor is typical dominant recessive genetics, so not codominance like the antigens are. So that means if someone is RH positive, that is going to be the factor that transmits down to fetus, but that's separate. That would be a separate little Punnett square. So we'd have RH, maybe someone was like RH positive and then someone was RH negative, then all of their offspring would be RH positive because of normal dominant recessive genes. But if you had someone who was heterozygous and one person was heterozygous or homozygous negative and one person was heterozygous positive, then your inheritance pattern would be, you would get 2 offspring that were RH positive and 2 offspring that were RH negative. So both though could cause a antigenic immune system response to self. One though, the factor of inheritance is co-dominance, and the other is just your typical dominant recessive. But they both are inherited. But I'd say, yeah, I would answer both if that question came up on an NPlex. I doubt it would. It would most likely come up in the question of blood typing, and they might ask a genetic question about codominance or dominant recessive, or they wouldn't ask about partial dominance that only exists in plants typically, but they could do codominance or dominant recessive traits. So understanding what that means and how that works, basic little Punnett square could probably take you far for those type of questions. That's a great one to think about. I would say both. Okay. So into the skin, really my things with the skin that I want you to understand are going to be the basic regions and the cells or the players in those regions. So our 2 distinct regions of the skin are going to be your epidermis and your dermis. Your epidermis being more superficial, your dermis being more deep. And then you also have this hypodermal region, which is your superficial fascia. It's subcutaneous to your skin. It's not a part of your skin. It's going to share some functions of the skin, but it's not a part. It mainly has adipose tissue that's going to help with shock and insulation. So here's your picture. We're going to dive into the epidermis first. So epidermis is mainly composed of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. There are 4 main cell types that you need to know that are found in the epidermis. We know that they like asking these questions because we've had a couple practice questions that have had these cells in them. So the 4 cell types are your keratinocytes that produce your keratin that gives your skin its protective qualities. It would be the major cell of the epidermis. If you had to choose one, choose keratinocytes producing keratin. They're connected tightly by desmosomes. Those are those cell communication devices that keep certain cell lines connected and together. But again, as they move to the top, they slough off. You then have more functional components of the epidermis. These are your melanocytes, your dendritic or Langerhans cells, and your tactile or Merkel cells. Your melanocytes are more spider-like. They're deep into the epidermis, not superficial. They don't slough off. And they produce melanin, which provides protection against UV damage and pigmentation of the skin. You then have your dendritic or Langerhans cells. These are going to have immune system function as their name, dendritic. They're macrophages. They patrol the deep epidermis, and they are key activators of your immune system. They're often superficially on the skin. The first cell that recognizes a foreign invader engulfs it via its phagocytic action, and then displays it outside of its cell to warn and to signal other immune system molecules. And then you have your tactile Merkel cells. These are sensory receptors that can sense touch. These are your 4 main cell types of the epidermis. Now the epidermis has 4 cell types, but 5 layers. So thick skin has 5 layers. Thin skin has 4 layers. There's only 4 strata. So again, the lucidum is not in thin skin. So it's a really easy question to ask. They'll ask that in a certain way. They'll say, in thin skin, list the 4 layers in order, or list the layers in order of the epidermis. And then they'll give you an answer that contains all 5 layers in the correct order. But the key is recognizing if they said thin or thick skin. So your 5 layers of the skin, though, if we are talking about thick skin layers, is going to start at the basale. So basale, spinosum, granulosum, lucidum, and corneum, moving from deep to superficial. Yes. Germinatum. Yes, so great. So she just pushed me into my next slide. Perfect, thank you. So our stratum basale, or basal layer, can also be called the germinativum. The germinativum. And that's because it has active mitosis that occurs. So your basal layer, think about the layer that causes that cellular division. It's going to be the deep layer. It attaches to the dermis. It's going to consist of a single row of our stem cells that divide. So this is the mitotic layer. It's going to produce 2 daughter cells every time. Those daughter cells move to the top, die off as they reach the surface. But 1 daughter cell of each mitotic division will stay in the stratum basale as a stem cell. So you'll have stem cell, it'll divide. 1 will become a stem cell again. Yay, like its parent. The other one is going to leave. It's going to say, bye, see you later. And it's going to go to the surface and it'll die off. There's also about 10 to 25% of this layer that's composed of melanocytes. This is where melanocytes can live as well. Then you have your stratum spinosum, or your prickly layer. The several cell layers thick. It's going to have this kind of web-like intermediate pre-keratin filaments. They're attached to desmosomes. This is the layer that resists tension and pulling. And the keratinocytes in this layer are spiky, and so that's why they can be referred to as like prickle cells. This layer also has melanosomes, which hold melanin, and dendritic cells. So this would be a layer that can do immune system function. You then have your granulosum layer, your granular layer. This is 4 to 6 layers thick, but the cells are flattened, so it's very thin. At this layer is where your nuclei and your organelles are going to disintegrate and go away. This is where keratinization begins. So you accumulate keratin within the cells. The cells become more water resistant. They become more of a protective layer, but less metodically, or less active, less metabolically active. Cells above this layer die because they're too far away from dermal capillaries. They aren't getting any nutrition because, again, these cells aren't mitotically dividing anymore unless if they're stem cells. And that's in the basale layer. The lucidum layer is clear. It's found only in thick skin. It really doesn't have a lot of function outside of an extra layer of protection. And so that's why in thick skin, it has this extra lucidum layer, clear, flat, dead keratinocytes, but in thin skin, it will not. And then you have your stratium corneum or horny layer because it's horned, right? The cells. These are 20 to 30 rows of flat, anucleated, no nuclei, keratinized dead cells. The dead cells, really their goal is preventing water loss, keeping safety, preventing abrasion or penetration. And these cells, they go through apoptosis, they do undergo programmed cell death. The dead cells will slough off, and humans shed a bunch of cells per minute, which is gross, but it's true. There you go. That's about it. So if you're a visual person, this shows you the different layers, stratum corneum being the thickest layer, but they're really dead cells on top of each other, stratum granulosum, spinosum, and basale. This is showing thin skin. There's no lucidum in this picture. Then we have our dermis. Our dermis is our strong, flexible, connective tissue. It contains a lot more cell types, fibroblasts, macrophages, mast cells, white blood cells. Also contains our nerves, our blood vessels, our lymph vessels, our hair follicles, our oil glands, and our sweat glands. So when in doubt, it's in the dermal layer, except for if it's the 4 cell types we talked about in the epidermal layer. Yes. No, it's good. Or areas that are more contacted with like external tissue. So base of the feet would be considered thick skin, so more callus type areas. You could also see it on like even areas like the shoulder, the elbows, the knees. Those could be thick skinned areas. Thin skin, think about like your internal surfaces of your hand, your palms, things that are more sensitive. Face would be thin skin, even neck would be thin skinned. So areas that might be more rough and tumbled, thick skin, areas that are more superficial, thin skin. Yeah. And of the dermis, the more active layer, there's 2 layers, a papillary and a reticular layer. So we see here there's a papillary dermis and then a reticular dermis. So we'll look at both of those layers. So our papillary layer of the dermis is the superficial layer of the dermis. So it's closer to the epidermis. It's going to have areolar connective tissue, which is loose interlaced and collagen. It's going to also contain elastic fibers and blood vessels. The looser fibers, the areolar connective tissue that's looser, allows for phagocytes to kind of patrol for microorganisms. And you're going to have these regions called derma papillae that come from the papillary layer that extend up into the epidermis. And these contain things like capillaries, nerve endings, touch receptors. So they're able to actually sense stuff that's going on in the epidermis, but they're still in that dermal layer. They're not actually in the epidermal layer. They just push up into the epidermal layer. In thick skin, again, dermal papillae, so on like your fingertips, dermal papillae lie on top of dermal ridges, which give these friction ridges. They enhance things like gripping ability, contribute to sense of touch, sweat pores, and so we get our fingerprints from these ridges. They have characteristic skin markings. So then our reticular layer. So that was our papillary layer of the dermis. Our reticular layer of the dermis is the majority of the dermis. It's more coarse and dense connective tissue, so not loose. It's going to be more involved in our strength and resiliency of our skin. The collagen fibers also bind water, keeping hydration present. This is where your cutaneous plexus, your network of blood vessels lie. And you're also going to have kind of this extracellular matrix that allows for some deposition of adipose or fat cells. In the reticular layer, you're going to have cleavage tension lines. And this is due to collagen fibers running kind of parallel to skin surface. You can't see them externally, but it's important for surgeons. So when you do minor surgery, it'll be important to go parallel to cleavage lines because incisions that are made that way are healed quicker. So anytime we do any type of excision, we always go parallel to wherever the cleavage lines are in the skin. It's also easier to cut. Think about like slicing a steak or a piece of chicken, right? You're going to want to cut parallel to those lines, that granulation. It's going to be easier to slice. You're going to get a better piece of meat. If you're not a meat eater, I don't know, maybe like a mushroom would be the best. I don't know. hard to compare. Cauliflower. I made some good cauliflower steak the other day though, so I eat meat too. Okay, anyways. Also in our reticular layer, we have flexure lines, which are dermal folds on your joints. That's how we can have these little lines like at our wrists. Those are dermal folds. And it allows us to have deep, like different movements, right? So we're able, if we didn't have dermal folds, if our skin was so taut and tight at our joints, we wouldn't be able to move our joints because our collagen would be holding us in place. So because we have these dermal folds, these natural folds in the skin, we're able to do these different motions without tearing our skin tissue every time. But this is how stretch marks can form. Extreme stretching can cause dermal tears or striae. All right. What else do I want to talk about before we go? That was skin structure, and skin structure and cells is super important. So I wanted to cover that. Hair, not as much. I'm going to get to glands. There we go. Okay. We're moved forward. We fast forwarded to sweat glands. Also called, so this is slide 49 if you're following along. Also called pseudophorus glands. All skin surfaces except for nipples and parts of external genitalia contain sweat glands. There's two main types, eccrine or americrine and apocrine sweat glands. So we're going to first talk about eccrine or americrine sweat glands, and then we'll use either or. This is the most abundant. They're on palms, soles, forehead. The ducts connect directly to pores, and they function in thermoregulation. So the sympathetic nervous system is going to have some innervation function. We talked about this, right? Sympathetic nervous system can stimulate sweat to help with thermoregulation because we have increased metabolism with the sympathetic nervous system. Their secretion here is sweat, which is mainly water, but also has some other stuff too. Vitamin C, which is interesting, some antibodies, a microbe-killing peptide known as dermacidin. Waste comes out. So this is also a munctory. We can see it here. Our eccrine or americrine glands. Versus our apocrine sweat glands are combined to our axillary or anogenital areas. These are going to secrete more viscous, like milky yellow sweat that contains more fatty substances. That makes sense. It's milky, it's yellow, and proteins. The bacteria then can break down that sweat, which leads to body odor. That's how body odor occurs. They are larger than the eccrine sweat glands. The ducts empty into hair follicles. That's a major difference. So merocrine sweat glands or eccrine sweat glands, the ducts have their own pore versus apocrine sweat glands empty into hair follicles. They begin functioning around puberty. There's also modified apocrine glands, ceruminous or ceruminous glands. They line our external ear canal and they secrete cerumen, or mammary glands secrete milk. We also then have another gland, our sebaceous or oil glands. These are widely distributed, except for they're typically not on thick skin of palms and soles. They develop from hair follicles and secrete also into hair follicles. They typically aren't active until puberty, so hormones, specifically testosterone or androgens, DHEA, can stimulate. And they secrete sebum. It's oily and it has bacterial killing properties, bactericidal, and it also can soften our hair and skin. So those are our big major glands. So here is your differences here, your functions, your type, your method, your secretion, and your body location. Okay, we're gonna move here. Protection, that's fine. I don't need to, we talked about that. I'm just seeing what I want to hit for our last times together. Talked about this. Okay, good. We're doing good. Oh, this might be helpful. Okay. Knowing the difference between the three types of cell cancer will help you. So basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma. So basal cell is the least malignant and most common. It's when the stratum basale cells proliferate and slowly invade our dermis or hypodermis. The stratum basale, our base of our epidermis, slowly start to invade our dermis and our hypodermis. Typically curable by a surgical excision. So that's our basal cell, BCC, most common, least malignant, stratum basale cells proliferating slowly into the dermis and hypodermis. Then we have our squamous cell. This is the second most common, and it's more dangerous because it can metastasize. Involves our keratinocytes of the stratum spinosum. Typically seen more on scalp, ears, lower lip, or hands, but can be anywhere. And typically also good prognosis, but it's more dangerous because it can metastasize. And then we have melanoma. This is the cancer of melanocytes. Most dangerous because it's highly metastatic. Again, you have your rule of A, B, C, D, E. There's sometimes they add like another letter now too. But if you know the degree of severity, the degree of commonality, and the type of cell line involved, that will be enough to get you through most of your skin cancer type questions. They're not going to, again, this is not a test of diagnosis, but they do want you to recognize etiology, pathogenesis, things like that. And that's that. That's the skin. That's integument. We've done it. Do you have questions? We can. Is there Jeopardy that you want to play before we go? Huh? Any Jeopardy? We can play Jeopardy. That's fine. Wants some review? Okay. I can pull up some Jeopardy really fast. Okay, I will get us. Are the Jeopardies helpful review tools for you? Okay, I have them for every system, so I can post them for every system. I will, for you all on the world of electronics, I will also post the videos today. I just couldn't post them yesterday because I was driving to Eugene and back. So I will work on that as well. I don't think I'm going to be able to get Jeopardy up in 9 minutes, but I can try. I will also post all the Jeopardies and the anatomy coloring sheets, question sheets too. So that's what I'll be working on today and probably into the weekend. So don't yell at me until Monday if you don't see it up there, but it'll probably be today that I can get it there for you. All right, so mastering Pearson. Okay. And I will try to sign in and get a Jeopardy up before our time ends. So if those of you that want to stay and play Jeopardy, you're welcome to. Those of you that want to leave, you can go. But by popular demand, I will get it. I just have to log into my account. I used, so Pearson creates like the base, I guess, the PowerPoint like base, and then I change the questions manually myself. But the PowerPoint, if you can edit the PowerPoint to include any questions that you want or any topic that you want, and it'll work just like Jeopardy. Yeah. So, but Pearson's the person who actually created the PowerPoint to do what it does. I don't know how they did that. While I'm pulling this up, any questions from in person or online? I might not be able to get in there.
Dr. Pacho, this is from online.
Hi.
Could you speak about memorization techniques in general and recommendations?
At this point with a week and some days to go, flashcards and test questions are going to be your most high yield, and repetition. That's going to be your best bang for your buck. So flashcards, practice questions, and repetition as much as possible. And the best flashcards are things that are short, like short memory. So have longer descriptions on the side that you're looking at and be trying to recollect like a 1 to 2 word phrase. Don't try to do the opposite because you're going to have the answers in front of you on the test. You just need to be able to make the association. My best answer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I did the shit ton of flashcards. Disgusting, but it was helpful, really helpful. I love my flashcards. Any other questions while I'm trying to get this up before we go? My goal for you in general at this stage would be working on primarily review too. I mean, I understand you probably still have some stuff that you're looking through from the beginning or first time, but if you can do mostly review over the next week and then high yield new stuff, that will also help you greatly. Okay, I do have a few. I thought I had a couple. Quiz show. Okay, edit. I am uploading 2 Jeopardies today, and we'll play one of them. And those who want to leave can go, but those who want to stay, go for it. Okay. Fast action. All right. Yes. Okay, what we just went through, this should be easy. We just covered it. Integument. Accessory glands 4. This gland is found in the skin and it's also a holocrine gland. Is it endocrine, ceremonious, sebaceous, sudiferous? We did it. Nope. Gland found in skin, also holocrine gland. Okay, we have a C. We have I heard an A. What's holocrine mean? That's a great question. Absolutely. Holocrine, mode of secretion involving secretion of entire cytoplasmic materials within remnants of dead cells. Your answer is C. Good job. It was also one of the only ones that made sense because one of the only ones we talked about, right? So that works.
Dr. Petshow, can you
Yes.
could you share your screen?
Oh,
So we can see the options online. Thank you.
sorry guys. I thought it was shared. All right, from current slide back to beginning. Okay, what next? Dermis 2. Which of the following is not associated with the dermis? Blood vessels, collagen, elastin, keratin. Not associated with the dermis. Are blood vessels in the dermis? Yes. Is collagen in the dermis? Yes. Is elastin in the dermis? Probably. Great. Is keratin in the dermis? We know keratin's in the epidermis, so keratin is your answer. Yes, D. Good job. I know you're all showing me. Okay, perfect. All right. What's next? Hair and nails are modifications of the, we didn't talk about hair and nails. This is good. Dermis, epidermis, hypodermis, none of the above because they're not part of the skin. Okay, we can rule out one answer. I heard an answer there. I heard see some answers here. B, they're modifications of the epidermis of B. We could rule out D because that's not a question, but hair and nails are modifications of the epidermis. All right, what next? Rapid fire. Intro 3. The skin makes up what percentage of the body weight? Oh, you would never have to be asked this, so I don't care. 7%. You were wondering that question. Now you have the answer. Now you know forever. Okay, they won't ask that question. Great. The layer of the skin is responsible for fingerprints. We did. So the dermis, there's two components of the dermis, right? So we know it's probably dermis. There's either papillary or reticular. So which one's it going to be? Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Yes, it's D. Now you know you're a first answerer all the time. Don't change it. Oh, it broke my heart. Okay. Oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, what next? Accessory 5. What's the following is not an accessory gland of the skin? Sebaceous, ceremonious, mammary, or all of the above? It's not an accessory gland of the skin. Are sebaceous and ceremonious glands glands of the skin? Yes. So then if they are, is mammary glands a gland of the skin? They are. So they all are. Mammary glands are a type of skin gland. They're specialized though to secrete milk. Yes. Oh, sorry. Am I still sharing? I just did something weird. Okay. Which one? No, I'm asking which question. Dermis 5. Peg-like folds of the superficial layer of the dermis are called dermal what? Corpuscles, papillae, flexures, or ridges. These project into the epidermis. That's my hint for you. Yes, I hear some correct. It's papilla. Remember, the superficial layer of the dermis, the papillary layer of the dermis, has these peg-like projections that push into the superficial or the epidermis. Those are papillae. Epi for 4. Dogs track humans by the scent of epithelial cells that are constantly being shed. These cells shed from which stratum? What stratum sheds cells? Oof, that's a tongue twister for me. What is the most superficial layer? Yes, corneum. Corneum is the most superficial layer. That's where the cells shed. All right, what next? Intro 2. Which layer is not a part of your skin? Dermis, epidermis, hypodermis, papillary. Okay, great, good. Hypodermis. Hypodermis is not part of your skin layer. The papillary is part of your dermis. Remember, it's the papillary dermis, papillary layer of the dermis. Tricky. Dermis 4. Which the layer of the dermis is closest to the epidermis? The stratum basale, the stratum corneum, the papillary layer, or the reticular layer? What layer of the dermis is the closest to the epidermis? So what layer of the dermis is the closest to the epidermis? Yep, tricky. And yes, it is the papillary layer of the dermis is the closest to the stratum basale layer of the epidermis, right? The deepest epidermal layer is closest to the superficial dermal layer. The brain twister. Okay. Are we done? Keep going. Epidermis 2. What protein gives the epidermis its protective properties? Ooh, keratin, collagen, or keratin, collagen, keratin, or melanin. Keratin, collagen, keratin, or melanin. Yes, C, keratin. It's protective due to its keratin. Hair nails 3. We didn't talk about it, so let's figure it out. The smooth muscle associated with the hair follicle is called the erector pili, the erector vellus, the alopecia areata, or erector folliculi. What muscle is associated with the hair follicle? Correct. A, erector pili. Yes, so you'll never forget it now. The erector pili associated with the hair follicle. 4. All the following are associated with hair except a cuticle, matrix, medulla, or lunule. Cuticle, matrix, medulla, or lunule. Good. Well, I love wild guessing. It is a lunule. So there is a cuticle associated with the hair. That was a tricky one because you think about it associated with only nails. There is a cuticle, there's a matrix of the hair, and then there's medulla. There's no lunule of hair. All right, whoops, sorry. This one? What was that? Which of the following is not associated with nails? The eponychium, the keratin, matrix, or medulla? What one did you just see that was a part of? Oh, actually, there's two. Okay, never mind. That doesn't help you. Okay. Eponychium, keratin, matrix, or medulla. Which one's not associated with nails? It is one of them that was associated also with hair. It is the medulla. Yep, D. D is not associated with the nail. So there's a matrix of your nail. There's keratin in your nail. There's eponychium in the nail, but there's no medulla for your nail. All right, let's just finish that category. Protein found in hair and nails is what? Collagen, keratin, elastin, keratin. Keratin, good. And dermis, 3. Which layer of the dermis is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue? So which one is more dense? Is it of the two dermal layers? One layer is loose, allows for phagocytes to kind of roam. One is dense and is tensile strength. Yep, it is the reticular layer. Good. Papillary layer is the loose layer. We're gonna finish dermis. Sorry, I chose for you. The dermis is composed of what type of tissue? Adipose, connective, epithelial, stratified, squamous. Yep, it is connective tissue, dermal layer as a whole. Accessory 1. Pseudorefrous glands are known as what type of glands? Ceremonious, endocrine, sebaceous, or sweat? Yeah, sweat glands. Nice job. All right. Finish it off. What is sweat mostly comprised of or composed of? I said it. Is it salt? Is it antibodies? Is it water? Or is it waste? What is it mostly composed of? The majority of sweat. Water. Yep, water. Sometimes change your answer. I don't know what you are yet. With no strategy yet. Water. It has salt. It has antibodies. It has waste, but it's primarily water, sweat. All right, we'll finish it off. The sweat glands are important in the body. The sweat glands are important in body temp regulation are what glands? Eccrine, apocrine, ceremonious, sebaceous. Okay, so we have some A or B, so we've done some process of elimination. Answer is A, eccrine glands. Yes, good job. Those are our temp regulation glands, eccrine glands. Good. All right, we have 5 more. Intro 1. Okay, what layer of the skin has no blood vessels? None. Good. Epidermis. The papillary is part of the dermis. Hypodermis is below. Epidermis, no blood vessels. Epi 5. In which layer of the epidermis would you expect to find the healthiest cells? And that's kind of tricky. You also assume the most metodically active or metabolically active. Yeah. Basale, the base layer, where our stem cells are. Absolutely. It's also closest to the blood, right? Closest to the dermis. Epi 3. Which cells in the epidermis are key activators of the immune system? Keratinocytes, melanocytes, dendritic cells. Dendritic cells are Langerhans cells, though, right? And the tactile cells are Merkel cells. Dendritic cells are your answer. Keratinocytes are producing keratin. Melanocytes producing melanin. Tactile cells are your Merkel cells, your touch cells. And so dendritic cells are your epidermal Langerhans cells. You can have phagocytes in the dermis directly, not dendritic cells. So you will have phagocytic cells in the dermis. They both do phagocytosis, but you'll have just dendritic Langerhans cells in the epidermis. In the dermis, you have actual macrophages roaming the dermal layer. Yes. So your monocytes, when they go to peripheral tissue, and they say in peripheral tissue, monocytes transform into macrophages. One of those peripheral tissues is your dermis of your skin. Yep. Epidermis 1, okay. Mitosis occurs in which stratum? We know that. If you don't, it's okay. Basale, corneum, granulosum, spinosum. Where do cells divide? Where are the stem cells? Basale, and then intro. All contribute to skin color. We didn't talk about skin color. So all contribute to skin color except for what? What do we know doesn't contribute to skin color? That would be another option. Yep, keratin. So a hemoglobin, carotene, and melanin all contribute to skin color. Carotene, that's why you can become orange if you eat too many carrots. My dad did when he was going through cancer treatment because he drank a ton of carrot juice. Hemoglobin, because obviously we know it has pigment associated, and then melanin because melanocytes. Great. All right, we did it. We reviewed. Time is done. You can stay, but I'm going to leave. And thank you. I hope that this was somewhat helpful.